My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 33 years old, and I live in a quiet apartment on the north side of Minneapolis. I work in upper management at a logistics firm, the kind of job that demands long hours, thick skin, and a level of focus most people don't understand unless they've lived it. I built this life from the ground up. No trust fund, no emotional safety net. Just persistence, pain, and a deep hunger to prove I was more than what they said I'd become. That afternoon, I wasn't expecting anyone. I had just come home from a meeting, still wearing my heels and blazer, when I heard the knock. It wasn't hurried or hesitant. It was firm, familiar in a way I didn't like. When I looked through the peephole, I froze. It was my mother, Evelyn. And standing behind her, arms crossed, was her husband, Steve. I hadn't seen either of them in over 15 years. I opened the door but didn't move aside. "Rachel," she said, her voice light, like we'd just spoken last week. "We need to talk." Before I could answer, Steve pushed past me and walked into my apartment like he belonged there. My mother followed, offering me a quick, uncomfortable smile. I stood still for a moment, stunned at their audacity, before slowly closing the door. I didn't invite them to sit. I didn't ask how they were. I waited. Steve got right to the point. "We heard about your promotion. So, you're doing pretty well for yourself now." I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going but already bracing for impact. Evelyn chimed in. "The twins are starting college this fall, and, well, things are a little tight for us financially. We were hoping you could help out." Silence. I blinked. They weren't joking. After years of silence, after throwing me out of their lives at 16, they were standing in my living room, asking me to pay for the very children they pushed me aside for. I felt a wave of disbelief. Then something colder. Clarity. This wasn't about reconnecting. This wasn't an apology. This was a transaction. And in their eyes, I was finally valuable enough to matter again. But they didn't know who I had become. Not yet. I wasn't always invisible to her. When I was younger, before Steve came into the picture, it was just me and my mom. We didn't have much, an old 2-bedroom rental above my grandparents' garage, but we had each other. She worked as a physical therapy assistant while finishing school, and my grandparents helped raise me while she hustled. I remember late nights, the smell of ramen in the kitchen, and the sound of her tired voice reading me stories. She barely had the energy to finish. She wasn't a perfect mom, but she tried. I believed that. Then Steve happened. He was a quiet man, polite, but distant. They met at work and married when I was around 11. At first, it didn't feel like much had changed. He didn't say much to me, and I didn't ask for much in return. But slowly, and I mean slowly, the air in our home started to shift. Our dinners used to be noisy, full of laughter and little routines. Her asking me about school. Me helping set the table. That stopped. Suddenly, dinner was about Steve, his job, his day, his stories. If I spoke, it felt like my words floated into an empty room. If I asked for something, it was met with a maybe later that never came. And I noticed her eyes change. Not angry or cruel, just distant. Like she was always somewhere else. Like I was background noise. When she got pregnant with the twins, I was actually excited. I thought maybe this would bring us closer. I pictured helping with diapers, showing them how to read, being the cool older sister. I even babysat around the neighborhood, just to practice. But the more her belly grew, the more I disappeared. She stopped asking me about school. Our movie nights vanished. She even forgot my 13th birthday until the day after, when my grandmother reminded her. I laughed it off, said it was no big deal, but I cried that night under my blanket with the lights off. Steve didn't hate me. At least, I don't think he did. He just didn't see me. And once the twins were born, neither did she. Everything was about the babies, feedings, schedules, milestones. And I understood. They were infants. They needed her. But it wasn't just her attention that shifted. It was her affection. Her identity. She became a new mother to a new family. and I wasn't invited. I tried to earn my place again. I cleaned the kitchen without being asked, stayed out of trouble, kept my grades high, but nothing ever seemed to register. I wasn't angry then, just confused. And then numb. Looking back, I don't think I stopped trying because I gave up. I stopped because I realized I could pour every ounce of love and effort into that house, and it wouldn't change the fact that I no longer belonged in it. The worst part? She never noticed I was fading. Because by then, to her, I already had. The day they told me to leave wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no slammed doors, just a quiet conversation in the living room after dinner, like it was any other night. Steve did most of the talking. My mother sat beside him, arms folded tightly, eyes fixed on the floor. I remember every word, not because they were loud, but because they were so painfully calm. "Rachel," Steve began, "things have gotten tight financially. The twins need more space, more time, more of everything. We've done our best, but we have to prioritize." Prioritize. That word lodged in my throat like a stone. Then came the real blow. It's probably best if you move out. Maybe stay with your grandparents until you get on your feet. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, stunned, looking from Steve to my mother, waiting for her to say something. Anything. But she didn't. She just nodded. No protest. No hesitation. Just quiet agreement. I walked back to my room and packed a small bag, some clothes, my journal, a photo of me and my grandmother from when I was little. I remember standing in the doorway for a moment, looking around at the room I had spent my entire childhood in. It already felt like it didn't belong to me. I didn't even say goodbye. I walked to my grandparents' house that night under a cloudy sky, the wind cold on my face. My grandmother opened the door before I even knocked. She must have seen me coming from the window. She pulled me into a hug so tight I nearly broke. "I knew this day was coming," she whispered. My grandfather just shook his head, pacing the hallway with quiet fury. "Unbelievable," he muttered over and over. "To throw out your own child." They didn't ask many questions. They gave me the spare room, a warm meal, and the one thing I hadn't felt in years, safety. But love, as powerful as it is, doesn't pay for clothes, school supplies, or late-night bus rides home from work. They were retired, living on a fixed income. I knew they couldn't carry me. So I picked up a job at a local cafe, working evenings and weekends. It wasn't glamorous, refilling coffee pots, wiping down tables, counting crumpled $1 bills for tips, but it gave me just enough to keep going. I still went to school every morning, pretending like everything was fine. I didn't tell my teachers. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't want pity. I wanted to survive. And maybe, deep down, I still hoped she'd call. That she'd say she made a mistake. That she missed me. But weeks passed. Then months. Nothing. It was in that silence that I finally understood. She hadn't just asked me to leave her house. She had chosen a life that didn't include me. And I had no choice but to build one without her. The first thing I learned about being on your own at 16 was that no one is coming to rescue you. No one's going to make sure you get enough sleep before school or that you have a clean uniform for work. No one's going to remind you to eat, to rest, or even to dream. Everything becomes your responsibility, even the things you don't yet know how to handle. I worked after school and all weekend, scraping together just enough for bus fare, notebooks, and a thrift store winter coat. My grades dipped at first. It's hard to stay focused on algebra when your feet are blistered from standing on a greasy diner floor until midnight. But I kept going. I had no other choice. Then came college applications. I stayed up late in my grandparents' kitchen, hunched over a cracked laptop, filling out forms and rewriting essays until my eyes burned. When the acceptance letters started arriving, I was shocked. It felt like someone out there had seen me, really seen me, and believed I had potential. But there was a catch: money. Even with scholarships, I couldn't afford tuition on my own. I needed a co-signer for the federal loans. That meant one thing: asking my mother. I stared at my phone for hours, drafting and deleting the message. Eventually, I settled on something simple. Hi, Mom. I've been accepted into several schools. I'm trying to secure financial aid. Would you be willing to co-sign a loan? I pressed send and waited. She replied the next morning. Sorry, we're saving for the twins. We can't help. Hope you understand. No congratulations. No questions. Not even a good luck. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I wasn't shocked, but the rejection still cut deeper than I expected. I had dared to hope, even after everything. That's when my Aunt Claire stepped in. When I told her what happened, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You are not going to miss out on your future because some people forgot how to be family. I'll co-sign it." She didn't lecture me. She didn't ask what my GPA was. She just believed in me. And that belief that someone saw me as worthy, not out of obligation, but out of love, meant everything. From then on, I worked like my life depended on it. Because in many ways, it did. I took classes during the day and worked nights doing web design for local businesses. I taught myself coding from YouTube and late-night tutorials. I rarely slept. I lived on microwave noodles and discount coffee. But I was doing it. I was moving forward. And through it all, birthdays, holidays, milestones, I heard nothing from my mother. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of her life on social media, photos of the twins at science fairs, matching family outfits at Disneyland. I was never mentioned. Not a tag. Not a memory. It was like I had never existed. Eventually, I blocked her account. It wasn't anger. It was self-preservation. When graduation finally came, I invited one person, Claire. She sat in the front row wearing a bright blue dress, ugly crying as I crossed the stage. My mother wasn't there. She hadn't earned that moment. But Claire had, and I would never forget who showed up when it counted. By the time I turned 30, my life looked nothing like the one I came from. I had paid off a chunk of my student loans, moved into a modest but beautiful apartment in a quiet part of Minneapolis, and landed a leadership role in supply chain management at a company that finally saw my value. I didn't post much online, just enough to keep up with distant cousins or old classmates. I kept my success quiet, not out of shame, but because peace had become more precious to me than recognition. Only Claire knew the full picture. She always asked about work, about my apartment, about the website I was building on the side. She was proud of me. And one day, at a family gathering, she let it slip. It wasn't intentional, just a passing comment over potato salad. But someone told my mother. 3 days later, she was at my door with Steve. I hadn't seen them in over 15 years. The knock was firm, unapologetic. And when I opened it, they both stood there like they had every right to be on my doorstep. "Rachel," my mother said, smiling like nothing had ever happened, "we heard about your new role." "That's wonderful." I didn't say anything, just raised an eyebrow. Steve cut in, blunt as ever. "The twins are starting college this fall. We've hit a bit of a financial snag. Figured you could help." Help? I blinked. They weren't asking. They were expecting. As if the years of silence, the abandonment, the complete erasure of me from their lives had never happened. As if I owed them something simply because I had survived what they put me through. I took a slow breath. "Why would you think I'd help you?" Steve scoffed. "Because you can afford it. You don't have kids. You're single. You've got more than you need." My mother added, "Don't be dramatic. We're just asking for help. It's what family does." I looked at her then, not as the woman who raised me, but as a stranger trying to cash in on a bond she had broken years ago. "You didn't help me when I needed you most," I said. "You didn't sign that loan. You didn't call. You didn't care. I made it without you. And now you think I owe you for being absent." "You're being selfish," she snapped. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm being honest." I stood taller, shoulders back, heart calm. "You made your choice when you told me to leave. I made mine when I never came back. They left with nothing. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood. Sometimes, Saying no is the loudest form of healing. And I was done whispering. After they left, I stood in the middle of my living room for a long time, staring at the closed door. There was no triumph, no sense of victory, just silence. A clean, undeniable silence. I didn't cry. I didn't second-guess myself. I didn't replay the conversation 100 times in my head the way I used to after every painful moment with them. Because this time, I had said everything I needed to say. The next morning, I wrote a short email. It was polite, measured, final. I wish you well, but I am not in a position, emotionally or otherwise, to support your request. I hope you understand. Please do not contact me again. And with that, I let it go. No social media posts, no family group texts, no drama, just distance. I wasn't angry anymore. That part of me had burned out years ago. What remained was clarity and the quiet strength that comes from surviving what you were never meant to endure. I chose to redirect my energy. I began contributing to a scholarship fund at my old community college, specifically for first-generation students who didn't have anyone to co-sign their dreams. I included a note with every donation. For the kids no one believed in. I stayed close with Claire, called her every Sunday, brought her flowers for no reason, and told her often that she had saved my life, without ever realizing it. Peace didn't come all at once, but it came. And as for my mother, I stopped wondering if she'd ever change because I didn't need her to. The woman I became had nothing to do with the woman she was. I had stopped chasing apologies. I had stopped needing her approval. And in doing so, I had reclaimed something far more valuable than her validation, my own voice. And I wasn't giving it up again. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret cutting ties with her. They ask if I feel guilty, if I ever wonder about the twins, if I think I'll reach out one day. And my answer is always the same. I don't carry guilt for enforcing boundaries. I carry peace. The truth is, not everyone who gives you life knows how to love you. And not everyone who calls you family deserves a place in your future. That's something I had to learn the hard way. Through empty chairs at graduation, unanswered messages, and birthdays spent alone. But I also learned that love doesn't always come from where you expect. Sometimes, it comes from an aunt who signs your loan without hesitation. From a grandmother who always leaves the porch light on. From strangers who become mentors. Friends who become family. I built my life from the pieces they left behind. And I built it well. I have a home filled with laughter and quiet. A career that challenges and fulfills me. A circle of people who know my worth without needing a backstory. And every day, I wake up proud. Not because it was easy, but because it was mine to claim. So, if you're listening to this, and you've ever felt like you weren't enough, like someone you loved made you feel disposable, I want you to hear me when I say, you are not too much. You are not hard to love. You are not broken beyond repair. And most importantly, you are allowed to walk away from what hurt you. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you'll ever do is simply choose peace over permission. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, or leave a comment. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone. This is Rachel's story, but it might just be someone else's too.